Hello, authors, book lovers, and storytellers. Welcome to another session here in Readers Magnet's featured author interview. My name is Leanne. I will be your host for today, and with me is one of the Readers Magnet's featured author. And today he will be sharing to us what this book is all about, him as an author, and of course, what inspired him to write this book. So, yes, everyone, let's all welcome our one and only Mr. John Gehrisch, author of the book The Gulf Pro Has Heart. Secrets of Couples Still in Love After 50 Years, second edition, a private look behind the curtain of the professional golf tour. Yes, hi John, it's good to see you. How are
Hello,
you doing?
everyone. Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Yes, John. So, this is the moment that we've been waiting for because it's now time to tackle more information about your book. But of course, before we do that, I wanted you to have a little bit of self-introduction, let the people know who you are as an author. So, yes, John, take the stage.
Okay, well, I started out electrical engineer out of college, but I never really wanted to do any engineering. I wanted to get into sales and marketing. But I wanted something that would be around for my lifetime, and I figured electronics would be. So I worked for several companies, and as a sales engineer, promoted to regional sales manager, promoted to a marketing manager, and eventually started my own company that made wire and cable. And I sold that in 1999. Warren Buffett owns it now. We made enough wire to wrap the world 13 times the year before I sold it. And so I went out and played the professional golf tour for 3 years, was in an automobile accident. Truck hit me at a red light. I was behind another car and I got squashed, and had some knee surgery and back problems from it. I can still
Mhm.
play the game. I just can't play at that level. So I got into doing some corporate turnarounds and got into commercial real estate and a few things like that. And then eventually became an author.
Yes, and now you're here. Wow, you've been through a lot, John, from owning a business into marketing, sales, and right now writing a book. Okay, yes, and that's the reason why you're here. So yes, John, will you please let us know what this book is all about?
There's kind of two sections to the book
Hmm.
that remarkably flow together pretty well. I've had a number of people comment on that. What maybe it'd be easiest to kind of tell how this whole thing came about. And so I was married the first time at 19 years old, which you don't have to tell me was stupid. The
You're fine.
marriage lasted 22 years. Eventually, it fell apart, and uh, I don't get into bad mouthing her because she's not here to defend herself. But we have two children together, and none of us even speak to her, so you can surmise what you want out of that. So then I was proposed to again by a promotional model, and we ended up getting married. And
Hmm.
there was infidelity, and I ended up being forced to file for another divorce. So now somebody who expected to be married once was suddenly divorced twice. Somebody who thought they would never be divorced. And
Hmm.
um, I went through a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out, well, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing here?
Hmm.
And um, I started thinking about my parents, who were married for 50 years, totally in love, best friends. I don't remember ever even seeing them argue. And being raised in that environment was what I expected my marriage to be like, and it didn't turn out that way twice. So uh, I started to think about them as a couple.
Hmm.
Like, what was I missing here that they had? And I started to look at them as individuals, and I started to see some common traits. And it started a process that took place over just under 2 years, somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, of studying couples. The criteria
Mhm.
had to be that they were married for 50 years or more. They had to be in a fulfilling relationship. They had to be happy. They had to be still madly in love and best friends. If they met
Mhm.
that five criteria, then I started to study them. And I started to see the traits that my parents had in, first it was couples I knew, and then it got
Mhm.
into couples I didn't know that met that uh, criteria. And there was a lot of back and forth because as I studied a new couple, I might see a trait that I had missed in previous couples. So I would go
Mhm.
back and see, and lo and behold, they had it too. And when I got done 2 years later, let's call it 18 months later, I discovered that all these couples had 18 common traits. I mean, maybe one had 17, but for the most part, they all had the same 18 traits. And I felt like I had found the holy grail to happy, loving, long term relationships. And I started to share some of what I had found with friends and relatives. And everybody was like, "You've got to write a book. I've never heard of such things before." And, I didn't go into it to write a book. I went into it so that I didn't make another mistake if I chose to get married again.
Mhm.
And um, uh, I wasn't motivated to write a book. But one night I was having dinner with a couple,
Mhm.
um, friends of mine, and she's an author of about 24 books. And we got to talking about it. And she said, John, a few years ago, I started a relationship book and I never really finished it. And when I get done with my current project, I would like to finish that book. How would you like to co author with me? And I said, wow, Kathy, that's something I might consider. I was thinking to have somebody who had that kind of experience to help me walk through this process because I had never written a
Mhm.
book. I
Mhm.
thought, that might be a way to go. She said, well, pull together what you have and maybe you have enough for your own book. And I said, no, I don't think so. But I'll pull it together in book format for you and you can look at it while you're working on your other project. So I did that and I got it uh, done. And I thought, she's a seasoned author here. I'm giving this first attempt at a book to somebody who's so experienced. I should have somebody critique this book. And I knew a woman for quite a while that lived in Naples, where I was living at the time, who had done presentations at the United Nations. And I thought, wow, I wonder if she would take the time to read this and critique it. And I talked to her, and she said, yeah, I'll do that. So we got back together a few weeks later, and of course, we were having a glass of wine, and I'm sitting there waiting for her to bring it up, and she doesn't. And finally, I said, "Look, yeah, you're killing me here." And I had told her when she took it, I said, "Look, don't just tell me it's good. That doesn't help me.
Mhm.
Tell me how I can improve this." And
Wow.
she looked at me. She looked at me very seriously, and she said, John, I love this, and I learned a lot. But I think you need a hook. And I think I
Mhm.
have a hook for you. And I said, well, what is it? She said, there are many relationship books, but I've never seen one that had any golf in it. And you have such great stories you've shared with me that's happened on the golf course or that you heard about on the golf course. And some are funny, some are just interesting, some are tear jerkers. And I think you ought to include those kinds of stories in your book. And I thought about it and I said, you might really be onto something because women are the fastest growing population in golf today. They're
Mhm.
more likely to pick up a relationship book than a guy. I mean, there are plenty of guys
Mhm.
that have picked up this book, but
Right.
Uh, but if I'm a woman and I want my boyfriend, husband, or fiance to read a relationship book, I might be more apt to be successful if it has some golf oriented stories in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically went back and wrote, I told Kathy, the other author, what I was going to do. And I went back and I basically wrote a second book. And then the challenge was, well, how do I meld this together? But what was really interesting was I didn't realize how many of these stories were relationship oriented also. They had relationship in it. I mean, relationships are not only for couples. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you have relationships with people you work with or whatever. I mean, I'm trying to focus more on the relationship in terms of couples.
Mm-hmm.
But um, and so anyhow, I figured out how I wanted to do that. And so the book isn't just a boring read about how to improve your relationship or how to sustain a good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it has all that in there. The things that, it was like, why did I look at the people ask me, why did you look at the people that were 50 years in a happy marriage? I said, you know, when I had a business problem that I wasn't sure how to solve, I went to the experts that knew how to do it right. And I thought, why wouldn't I do that with this book? Why wouldn't I look at the people that have done it right? And those are the people that have been married for that long a time and are, totally in love and happy. And so I went to the experts, the unique couples that have experienced that. And, what's really interesting, we talked briefly about reviewers. One of the reviewers uh, on the first edition said this book should be mandatory in all schools. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know what? What's really interesting is we go through our entire education process, grade school, middle school, junior high school. If we go to college, we
Mm-hmm.
don't get one single course on two of the most important things we do in our life. One, choosing a life mate, and that's the subject that I took on. And second, should we have children? And if so, how to raise them? And when you really think about that, we learn about all this stuff we never use in our life again. Uh, but something so important as that, there's no courses on it. And every country I've been in, and I've been in quite a few, and everybody I've talked to that were in countries that I haven't been to,
Mm-hmm.
no country has those two courses in their curriculum. Isn't that strange? So, uh, anyhow, that like I said, I took on the relationship part of how
Mm-hmm.
to choose a life mate in the first place, because we don't have any training on that except maybe our parents give us a little guidance,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they're not happy. I mean, they may not be qualified to really tell us, and if they do, they only tell us a couple things. They're certainly not qualified to tell us how to choose a mate as thoroughly as I got into. Or maybe a friend, a girlfriend, a guy friend, whatever, tell
Mm-hmm.
tries to tell us, well, one thing I did wrong in choosing a mate was this, so don't do that, or whatever. Again, they're not really qualified to tell
Mm-hmm.
us what it takes to be in a long-term loving relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What I share, and people have talked, and said, well, it, it's your opinion, blah, blah. It's not my opinion. I'm not taking the credit for this. And they try to give me the credit. It's not me. It's what I learned from these people that did it right. Obviously, I didn't know either. I know this. Looking back, I would have never married the two people that I did, knowing what I know now. But I didn't know that then. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to save a lot of heartache and let people have. chance of having a good long-term loving relationship.
Right, one of the main goal. And you know what, John? One thing that I really love about the book, because it's not just about focusing the downside and the goal about having about relationship, but it's really looking for that formula for happy, loving, long-term relationship, and at the same time on how to really build a solid foundation. Because and also at the same time you mentioned earlier that the importance of or the advantage of opening up to someone. You have friends sharing these experiences, because it can really help foster closeness, intimacy, and of course the trust. Without it, relationship in general tend to remain superficial, or let or our partners can begin to feel disconnected and resentful of one
Right.
another. But opening up to someone takes time, and yes, it can be really tough thing to do, yes. But one thing that you're actually showing here is don't be afraid to go slow and let it build over time. I mean, wow, it's just so amazing. Now,
Uh,
you
you've hit
mentioned.
you've hit
Mm-hmm,
on a couple of the cornerstones of a good relationship, with which most
mm-hmm,
people do know. Everybody knows communication. It's critical.
right.
Uh, Trust is critical. Those are two
Mm-hmm,
big cornerstones that you must have.
mm-hmm.
And uh, but there are others that you may not think
Exactly.
about. And I try
Mm-hmm.
to walk people through the book. I ask them not to skip ahead to try to see the formula that I put together.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and I kind of lead them slowly and kind of a little discreetly, maybe even a little tricky
Yeah,
on.
like leaving a cliffhanger.
Yeah, well, I
Right.
kind of lead them to the point that when they get to the formula, it's almost like this makes total sense. This is
Mm-hmm,
almost common sense, but we
mm-hmm.
never think about a lot of these things, and we don't know the importance of it unless
Right.
we know that that's what these couples, what their
Mm-hmm.
foundation is, on their relationship. So
Mm-hmm. Really, yes. And you know what? I really like that this book talks about on how to build a solid foundation, because it's actually one thing that would be able to really support the weight of the building itself. Along with any additional stressors like people we met, furnishings, and more. It really does provide provides a solid anchor for the building, keeping it stable and secure. Relationship without a solid foundation, yes, definitely the building will eventually fall. And
yeah,
wow, you know what? I'm also curious about you mentioned earlier, John, that on this book there are really 18 common traits that you got from the person who shared their experiences. Would you mind sharing it a little bit of information about that?
you mean about the 18 traits?
18 common traits, yes.
Well, uh, that's the premise of the whole book. It explains those things in detail. But yeah, I mean, I
Hmm.
could. People say, "Well, give me one," for example. And
Yes.
can I come back to that just a second? I don't know why, but you triggered this. I got a email recently
Hmm.
from a gal that said she had been married she had read the book, and I can't remember. I get a number of them. I can't remember if she was married for 7 years or 15 years. And she said, I feel like I have a fairy tale marriage. I just couldn't, I don't know how it could be any better. And I read your book and I realized that I can't sit back on my hands and just assume it'll always be this way. I have to work at this to make sure I keep the excitement and
Hmm.
uh, keep the quality of what we have going on. You can't just assume it'll always be this way. And
Right.
she said, I'm going to go back and read your book again, only this time I'm taking notes. And it made me realize that people who have a very, very good marriage are still learning things on this, on how to keep it better, or keep it the way it is, maybe even
Hmm.
improve it. And I think we
Right.
can always improve things.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she had a number of ideas from it that she wanted to start doing and to kind of help keep the excitement. I mean, let's face it, when you're in a long term relationship, the excitement factor that you have in the beginning tends to, uh, uh, level out, if you will. And so anyhow, back to your question. So, in my opinion, and I write about this in the book, there are three kinds of people in the world. I think there are giver personalities, taker personalities, and taker personalities that think they're giver personalities. And I
Wow.
say that with a little bit of fun, but it's true. It's very true. Um, and I have personal experience of that. Somebody who thought they were a giver personality, but really were a taker personality. And so if you put two taker personalities together, it'll never work. Now, I'm not saying they may not stay married if they have a
Mm-hmm.
religious background that doesn't approve of divorce under any circumstance or something like that. They may stay together, but they're most likely going to be in separate bedrooms and so forth. They're not going to be happy. You can put a giver and a taker together, and that will last longer. The taker, I mean, the giver tends to think that if they give more, they can solve problems. They're also typically more patient, more committed people. Um, the key really is having two, and I'm not saying that won't work. It can work, but it's a challenge. It normally does not work. It will usually last longer than two taker personalities, but generally, a giver and a taker fall apart also.
Mm-hmm.
What worked was all of these couples were two giver personalities. And I mean, my parents were both two giver personalities. And really, every one of these couples I studied were two giver personalities. Now, I use an analogy in the book, and this won't be exactly like it, but you'll get the gist of it. Let's say you own a home and there's a knock
Mm-hmm.
on the door, and you go to the door, and there's a man standing there, and he says, "Hi, I'm Jim Smith, and I do home maintenance, and I was walking past your house, and I happened to notice that the windows, the wood around your windows, has paint that's cracked, and if you don't solve that, water's going to get in those cracks, and it's going to start rotting your windows. For $250, I can go down to Home Depot, get a scraper, a paintbrush, little primer, and some paint, and I can scrape that off for you, and get it, uh, repaint it, and you'll solve your problem." Say, well, yeah, okay. So you give him 250, and you hear him out there working, and suddenly there's a knock on the door, and you go to the door, and it's Jim, and you say, "Yeah, what's up, Jim?" And he goes, "Well, I've got some bad news. Yeah, moisture's already gotten into your windows, and the wood's starting to rot around your glass. And your glass is going to fall out. If I just paint over that, it's not going to solve the problem. For another $500, I can go down and get some wood, and I can reframe your windows, put some primer on it, paint it, and so forth, and you'll be set for many, many years." Well, I don't want my windows falling out. Okay, here's $500 more. So you hear him out there working, and suddenly there's a knock on the door, and you go to the door, and it's Jim again. He says, "I just happened to notice as I was reframing your windows that up under the eaves of your roof, the paint's bubbling there. And, you could have the same problem. And, I should get some, I should scrape that for you and paint it. And I need another $300 at Home Depot to solve this problem." Well, I don't know about you, but most people start to go, "Well, wait a minute here." You know, gonna, this guy's going to end up painting my whole house or something.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you start to build this wall of protection or resentment or whatever. It's kind of like, whoa, what's happening here? Well, that's what happens with a giver and a taker. Uh, the giver gives, the taker takes. The giver gives, the taker takes. And the giver starts to build this wall of resentment because they're not getting anything back. Typically, a taker will give, but it's usually to get something. And uh, the the giver starts to withdraw uh, and stop giving. And of course, the taker resents that because they're a taker; they want stuff. And the giver starts to become unhappy because they're starting to become somebody they're not meant to be. They're meant to give. And the taker becomes unhappy because they're no longer getting, and the relationship starts to fall apart. When you have two givers, a giver gives not because they're trying to get something like a taker gives. They're giving because that's their natural personality. They love to give, they love to see their significant other happy. The other person is a giver also. So they give back, not because they got something, but because that's their personality. And so there's this constant giving, giving, giving in life. And they don't start building this wall of resentment because they're who they're meant to be. And they're not giving because they want something back. They're giving because they love that person and they want to see that person happy. And so that's why the two givers work in a long-term relationship so well.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's
That's
good.
it.
Interesting. Thank you so much for that, John. And yes, you know what? I must say that yes, relationships can be hard to maintain, especially during these stressful times. But I must say that it's also easy to stay madly in love so long as you and your partner remain committed to each other. Learn more about how to stay in love and sustain a happy long-term relationship. Because of course, at the end of the day, putting in the effort to remain in love and avoid heartbreak would has really more to do with let's say daily actions than a single wedding ceremony. As long
Yeah,
as you can continue to approach one another with an open heart, you would really have the chance to stay in love for a long time. And I also like how you highlighted earlier, John, it really does include really active listening, you know um giving your partner a your full attention as they speak, responding appropriately. It's about maintaining a conversational tone, and to really learn their body language, respectful, engaged, and open. And wow, it's just so amazing. And especially that you're also talking about the three kinds of personality when it comes to
yeah.
relationship. I mean, wow, thank you so much for that, John. And John, I
Oh,
really wanted you to also take this moment to, if is there any advice that you can give to our people, who's I mean our viewers right now who might be interested to reading your book.
well, I
Is
think
there any message for them?
you
Go ahead,
know
John.
there. Men and women are different. Okay, and this book um, can help any kind of relationship. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman, but
Mm-hmm.
um, understanding the differences, and I get into that. Understanding the differences. What was that book that used to be out? Men are from Mars and women are from Venus, or the other way around. I can't remember, but that book there's a lot of truth in that. Um, it has, and I get into why that is. I mean, in pretty good depth. And if we understand those differences and understand that, uh, a man, for example, he's watching a sporting game or something, and the wife comes in and she's had a really difficult day, and she tries to tell him about it, and he's a fixer. Okay, well, you should have just done this, and he then wants to get back to the TV, and instead of really listening, what she really wants, she doesn't want him to fix it. She wants him to listen. just like her female friends do. And men have to realize they need to, what's more important, this person they love more than anything in the world, or a TV game? Fortunately today you can pause it and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
um, you need to focus on what that woman is saying to you, and really try to understand it. Don't try to fix it. Listen, be a best friend, and only if she asks for your advice, then do it. But there's a lot in the book that talk about it and explain why it is, what makes us
Mm-hmm.
different. I mean, there's literally a chemical thing that happens when we get, when before we're born, and it's understanding all that and being empathetic to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there's also a lot of, there's like one of the things I used to do. How much time do we have, Leah?
No, it's okay. You're fine,
Okay.
John. Don't think
One
about the
of
time. Yes.
one of
Mm-hmm.
one of
Go
the
ahead.
things that I talk about in there to help keep a relationship um, spicy, or not become mundane, is I used to do mystery dates, and I give ideas about
Mm.
that. My ex-wife loved these things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it could be an afternoon, it could be an evening, it could be a weekend, or it could be a week, where I just said, okay, we're gonna, let's say, be ready Friday night at 6 o'clock. This is the kind of clothes you want to wear. This is what you need to bring with you. And that's all she knew. And I had everything planned out and prepared. All she had to do is go and enjoy it. And it was my way of saying, I love you and I appreciate everything you do for me. And this is a small way of saying thank you. And there are things that we can do to, like one of the things I'm a strong proponent of is, I have seen a number of very good relationships destroyed because they had kids and the kids became the total focus.
Mm-hmm.
And someday those kids leave, and the couples had lost the relationship that they had that got them together in the first place. The kids would have never existed. So I'm a strong proponent of having a date night once a week without the kids, just to sit there and communicate and talk about what's happened that week, or what's going on, or you know whatever, just to keep that romance,
Mm-hmm.
communication going.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very sad story in my book, a true story. Everything in the book is true. I've changed names and cities maybe and so forth, but the book is completely true. But there's a story in there about a man who's still totally in love with his wife, and his wife didn't love him anymore after 22
Mm-hmm.
years of marriage, and he ended up committing suicide. He was a close friend of mine.
Wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
so had they done what I said, he told me, he said, we were sitting there. They had three girls. One was off in college. Two of them were out on dates. And for the first time, they were sitting there alone and they had nothing to talk about. And she eventually told him she didn't love him anymore. And he was devastated because he told me, he said, to this day, when she walks through the door, I still think she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And he really thought he was going to have to move out New Year's Day, and he didn't want that. And there was a little chemical imbalance going on in the family that
Mm-hmm.
contributed to it. We found out, but um, I mean, he committed suicide. I didn't see it coming,
That's sad.
and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never in my wildest dream would have expected it. And so that's another thing we need as friends and relatives and
Mm-hmm.
spouses to keep an eye out for, is depression and so forth. And but anyhow, there are stories in there. There's a lot of stuff that'll make you laugh. I mean, I've people, I mean, I've had reviews saying, I went from hysterics to tears back to hysterics again. So uh, it's not like a book that's going to make you depressed, but it will. It's an eye opener. There's a lot of
Mhm.
things, real eye openers in this process for me, and I tried to share it. So,
Yes, wow. Thank you so much for that, John. And
yeah,
John, before we end our interview, will you please show to our viewers your book? Do you have that? Do you have your book with you right now?
yeah, I think it's on screen there, isn't it? But
Yes,
anyhow,
yes.
if I
Uh-huh.
could do
Okay, there
this,
you have it, guys.
do it
Mm-hmm.
where they can't get where I don't have the shine on it.
Yeah, right, right. Thank you so much, John. It was really an interesting discussion. And of course, on behalf of Readers Magnet team, we are very happy that you also chose us to be part of this journey. So to our viewers, if you're the one who's looking for, tips on how to stay in love, how to have a healthy relationship, on how to save a struggling relationship, then this book is really for you. And you know what, John? One thing that I also discovered about your book, it's not just about focusing relationship when it comes to love partnered, but this book can be used to all aspects in life on how to really understand someone, to learn more information about that person. And this is really something helpful. And you know what, John, thank you so much, because again, it's not just about focusing the whole experience, your experience, but at the same time, this book is yours. It's really advocating for a specific cause and agenda. Thank you so much, John. So, hmm so
Yeah,
yes,
I
everyone.
always say
Oh,
this: of
sorry.
all
Go
the
ahead.
things that I've been very lucky and I've achieved a lot of things, but I got to tell you, of all the things I've done in my life, this is the thing I'm most proud of. So
You should be. You should
I
be.
know how it can help people, even like we talked about, even in relationships that are going perfectly,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
can really keep it going perfectly. So
Right, right. Thank you so much, John. So, yes, everyone, this is our author, our one and only Mr. John Garish, and he is the author of the book The Gulf Pro Has Heart: Secrets of Couple in Love After 50 Years, second edition, a private look behind the curtain of the professional golfer. And please, everyone, do check his book. That's available in Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. And of course, stay tuned because his website will be up and running very soon. And yes, Sean, again, thank you so much. As we say it here in Reader's Magnet, we share your story with the world. Thank you, John.
thank you.